Welcome back to another episode of Play Action Fantasy Football. Cameron here. Why don't we go ahead and jump into this wide receiver and quarterback start sit video. Let's get going to it. Thursday Night Football is going to start us off here with the Giants and the 49ers. Isaiah Hodgins and Darius Slayton will be starts for me. Slayton in the last two games, 6 catches on 11 targets for 77 yards. Touchdowns have not been there. Hodgins in the last game is starting to seem more like the guy is more of the second or third read for Daniel Jones here. Definitely somebody I would recommend as a flex position is either one of those guys. Any higher, I would not put them in my lineup. On the 49ers side of the ball, Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk will be starts. They are going up against rookie cornerbacks in this matchup. This is going to be a good matchup for them to definitely light it up for your fantasy team. So they should be a wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2, depending on who else you have. Juwan Jennings on the 49ers side is a sit, and also Paris Campbell and Jalen Hyatt will be a sit in this matchup. Moving on to the 1 o'clock games on Sunday, you got the Falcons and the Lions, and man, the Lions and the Seahawks game last week was a showstopper. Just nonstop scoring, it felt like, near the end there. Definitely a thriller to the very end, especially with overtime. Falcons on this side of the ball, I'm going to go ahead and start Drake London. He finally had a bounce-back week in week 2. Mac Hollins and Scott Miller will be sits for me on the Falcons side. Lions side of the ball, though, here's where it gets a little tricky. Amon-Ra St. Brown is questionable. He did have a little injury that kept him off the field for a couple plays there in that Seattle game in week 2. If he is not able to go, Josh Reynolds is a start for me. Looking at these numbers for Reynolds last week, he had 5 catches on 6 targets for 66 yards and 2 touchdowns. Definitely got more targets in the red zone, which is definitely an upside in fantasy football. In 2 games, though, Reynolds has had 9 catches total, 13 targets, 146 yards, and 2 touchdowns total. He's been fantasy relevant, at least at the flex or a low-end wide receiver too. So make sure you keep an eye on that injury report. If Amon-Ra St. Brown is starting and is going to play in that game, he's automatically a lock as a start. Josh Reynolds will be more of a flex start for me in that situation. And then obviously Marvin Jones Jr. is kind of an afterthought. He's going to be a sit. Moving on to the Chargers and the Vikings, you got Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. They will be a start in this matchup. This is going to be an explosive game. It's one I honestly can't wait to see. Hopefully it is on local TV for my district to see. Other than that, I'll have to find a way to stream it. Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, like I said, those guys did what they needed to do last week. Enough to make it fantasy relevant. Josh Palmer is kind of not even being talked about because of the fact that he is an afterthought, it seems like, as well, similar to how Marvin Jones is for the Lions. Viking side of the ball, you're starting every single receiver. Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, KJ Osborne. These guys killed it in week 2. And week 1, 2 of these guys were relevant, and that's Justin Jefferson, Addison. Addison seems like he's going to find a way to make points and get your production up for your fantasy team. In those 2 games for Jefferson so far this year, 20 catches on 23 targets, 309 yards, and 0 touchdowns. Touchdowns are not there, but it doesn't matter for him. He's going to do what he does. Addison in those 2 games, 7 catches on 11 targets for 133 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's finding ways to become fantasy relevant. That being the touchdowns, yes, he would still be a low flex option without those touchdowns, so keep that in mind. Moving on to the Saints and the Packers, Chris Olave and Mike Thomas will be starts. Rashid Shaheed will be a sit in this matchup at Lambeau Field. A little bit of a tougher matchup for the Saints here. They barely squeaked by with the Panthers game. Now they got to go to Lambeau. Speaking of Lambeau, let's go ahead and talk about their home team, the Packers. Christian Watson will be a question mark again for this matchup. At this point, I'm not even going to put him in the lineup. I got to see what he does first off. Kind of low, I said with Jerry Jeudy. I thought that it was something that he might actually be able to battle through. It does not seem that way. It seems a little bit more of a serious injury when it comes to his hamstring issue. Might be something that just lingers all year. Romeo Doubs and Jaden Reed are going to be starts for me in the last game. Jaden Reed with 4 catches, 8 targets, 37 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Those touchdowns definitely exploded for him, but it seems like Jordan Love is targeting Reed more. Moving on, we got the Texans and Jaguars, and you got Nico Collins and Robert Woods are actually going to be starts for me. No Tank Dell yet, but I will say this. Tank Dell last game had 7 catches on 10 targets, 72 yards, and a touchdown. But it was against the Colts. So keep that in mind. If he does another similar production against the Jaguars, who just held the Chiefs to 17 points, then maybe we'll be talking about Tank Dell in the starting lineup next week. Jaguars side of the ball, Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk are going to be starts for me. Zay Jones is not a start for me. You kind of can't even sit Ridley or Kirk. Yes, Ridley had a bad game. However, here's the plus side of Ridley's bad game. He had 2 catches on 8 targets. Christian Kirk had 11 catches on 14 targets in week 2. Ridley just couldn't come up with the catches. If he comes up with those catches, we're talking a whole different story. On 2 catches, he only had 32 yards. He turns in 2 or 3 more catches, we're probably talking 60 to 80 yards. Ideally. So Christian Kirk and Ridley will be starts and Zay Jones will be a sit. How about we talk about the Broncos and the Dolphins now? Jerry Jeudy coming off that injury, and no. Not starting him anytime soon until I see anything different. Marvin Mims, on the other hand, 2 catches on 2 targets for 113 yards and a touchdown. He will also be a sit for me. Seems like one of those oddball games. I need to see a little bit more for him. And now that Judy's back, it's kind of going to push Mims back to that wide receiver 3 role. I'm going to go ahead and sit both those guys until I see more. Courtland Sutton, on the other hand, will be a start for me. Last game, 5 catches on 7 targets, 66 yards. He's been a consistent target getter for Russell Wilson, and that's going to continue, it seems. So he is definitely a start this week. Dolphins, I'm going to go ahead and start Tyreek Hill. And if Jalen Waddle does play, he is in concussion protocol. He did not practice as of Wednesday, as of the day of this recording. It seems like if he does play, you will be playing him, but play him with caution. If you have another player that you can throw in there that you think has a better matchup based on these videos, go ahead and do so. As of right now, though, Jalen Waddle, I will start if he plays. Braxton Berrios will obviously be a sit in this matchup. Moving on, Titans and Browns. DeAndre Hopkins will be a start, and Treylon Burks will be a start. Hopkins had 4 catches on 5 targets, 40 yards. Not a whole lot of production there. However, Hopkins being Hopkins, he's going to draw a lot of attention, and that opened up for Burks here in week 2. Burks did not get a lot of targets, but he did have production, and that's what we like to see. 3 catches for 4 targets, and he turned it into 76 yards, enough for a little flex play this week if you have him. And Westbrook will be a sit for me in this matchup. Brown side of the ball, Amari Cooper is questionable. It seems like with a hamstring injury groin injury last week. Didn't seem like that was a major factor at all on Monday Night Football. That being said, moving into week 3, it seems that's the only guy that is going to get targeted by Deshaun Watson, which is why I have Elijah Moore and Donovan Peoples-Jones as a sit. How about Buffalo and Washington? Good matchup here. It's a really good matchup, in my opinion. This is going to be a game I'm excited for, just like the Vikings and the Chargers game. Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis will be starts for me, and Deontay Hardy will be a sit. On the Commander side of the ball, we got Terry McLaurin. He'll be a start, and Jahan Dotson and Curtis Samuel will be sits. Jahan Dotson, even with McLaurin out, did not even do anything with Sam Howell. Sam Howell is definitely looking to more McLaurin's way, and that showed in week 2 on his way back from injury. Colts and Ravens are up next, and Michael Pittman will be a start for me in this one. Alec Pierce and Josh Downs are going to be sits. However, Josh Downs is somebody I would keep an eye on. He is definitely starting to heat up a little bit in this offense. Not saying enough to put him in starts yet, but in his last 2 games, Downs has had 7 catches, 12 targets, and 67 yards. In his last game, he definitely has gotten more targets in his first week, and it seems to be pushing Alec Pierce back. Michael Pittman will be the only start for me in this matchup because it definitely does seem like Anthony Richardson will be out, which means Gardner Minshew, a veteran, is going to be in. That being said, if that is the case here, it's going to be beneficial for Michael Pittman. On the other side of the ball, you got the Ravens. We got Zay Flowers as a start. Rashad Bateman and Odell Beckham are going to be sits for me in this matchup. Odell Beckham looks like he's going to be missing a couple games here too, so that's definitely another reason why he is a sit for me, and he just did not do a whole lot against Cincinnati in week 2 or in week 1 against the Texans. Moving on, we got the Patriots at the Jets, and Kendrick Bourne and Devontae Parker will be starts for me. Juju Smith-Schuster will be a sit. Reports came out that Juju is not seen as a receiver in that organization for the Patriots, which is very interesting to have that type of report come out of there. Kendrick Bourne and Devontae Parker, though, like I said, they will be starts. Bourne in his last 2 games had 10 catches, 20 targets, 93 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Those 20 targets are definitely beneficial. So moving forward, it seems like Kendrick Bourne is the number 1 option for Mac Jones. Jets side of the ball, Garrett Wilson is a start, but he'll be a very casual start for me. It just seems like Zach Wilson can't get his stuff together. Now, they did have a conversation, and it turned into one big play that saved his fantasy day last week, and that was the one catch for 68 yards and a touchdown. You don't have that, Garrett Wilson should be on your bench. So we'll give him the benefit of the doubt for this next week. Maybe they can talk a little bit more this week in practice and see if they can figure something out. We'll see how he does in week 3. Panthers and Seahawks now. And I have Adam Thielen as a start, DJ Chark and Jonathan Mingo as a sit. Adam Thielen had 7 catches on 9 targets, 54 yards and a touchdown. Seems like Bryce Young is starting to target him a little bit more, which is definitely beneficial. Mingo also had 8 targets, but only 3 catches for 26 yards. Not enough production, and I got to see more throwing from Bryce Young. Thielen being the veteran, that's obviously a safe blanket for him to go to. Seahawks side, we have DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett as a start. Jackson Smith and Jigba is a sit in this matchup. Smith and Jigba has not had a whole lot of targets going his way. Week 3 catches on 6 targets for only 34 yards. Lockett found the end zone twice in that matchup, and DK Metcalf 6 catches on 6 targets for 75 yards, which is definitely why DK was the starter for that game to roll the offense forward. Bears and Chiefs now, and Darnell Mooney is questionable and seems like he will not be playing this week, at least from all reports that I am seeing at the moment. DJ Moore definitely had a big bounce back game. There. Chase Claypool is going to be a sit in this matchup as well. DJ Moore being probably the number 1 target now for Justin Fields going into Arrowhead is definitely going to be beneficial for DJ Moore owners. Chiefs side of the ball, Sky Moore will be a start for me. He had a big day. 3 catches for 4 targets. 70 yards and a touchdown. I mean, he had production just on the minimum amount of targets, it seemed like, in this offense. Kadarius Toney did have a little bit of a bounce back, not a whole lot. 5 catches on 5 targets, so he did catch every single target. He did get going his way. And then 39 yards, not a whole lot of yardage, but the good news is he is finally catching the ball, unlike in week 1. MVS and Rashee Rice will be a sit in this matchup. Now we got the Cowboys and the Cardinals, and CeeDee Lamb is just balling right now. He is just an outright baller. It seems like every single week this dude is putting up fantasy points, and you love to see it. And now they get a matchup against the Cardinals, who are definitely struggling on defense. If it's not CeeDee Lamb, it's Tony Pollard. And we'll get to that with the running back video and the tight end start sit. So CeeDee Lamb's a start for me. Brandon Cooks is a sit. Michael Gallup is also a sit. Cardinals side of the ball, Marquise Brown is the only start I have moving in that matchup. How about the Steelers and the Raiders? We have George Pickens coming off a good game against the Browns. It just seemed like his routes were flawless. Couple blown coverages did turn into a couple big plays as well. However, his route running was just phenomenal. So George Pickens will be a start for me in this one. Allen Robinson Jr. and Calvin Austin will be a sit. Devontae Adams will be a start for me on the Raiders side of the ball. Jacoby Myers is questionable. If he does come back from that concussion, which it does not seem likely, he is going to be a start for me in this matchup as well. Hunter Renfrow will be a sit. And finishing out Monday night games here, A.J. Brown has not had a good week in week 2. Decent week in week 1. We got to have a little bit more from A.J. Brown, but you can't sit the guy. You just can't. This is the type of matchup right here where this should be fireworks left and right. It should be. We get disappointed with a lot of those Monday night, Thursday night games. But A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith will be starts. Quez Watkins is questionable. He will be a sit. And then Baker Mayfield's favorite target, Mike Evans, is going to be a start. And Chris Godwin is also a start. Trey Palmer will be a sit. Mike Evans just had a phenomenal day last week. 6 catches, 8 targets, 171 yards, and a touchdown. So keep that in mind. Mike Evans is definitely Baker Mayfield's favorite target. He's automatically a start from here on out. And finishing off, we got the Rams at the Bengals. Puka Nacua and Tutu Atwell will be starts from me. They are definitely still up there in the targets. 20 targets for Nacua. That is absolutely insane. I believe that set an NFL record. He had 15 catches on those targets and 147 yards. Yeah. He's a baller too. He's putting up basically CeeDee Lamb numbers right now. It's ridiculous. Tutu Atwell didn't have a bad day himself. 7 catches, 9 targets, and 77 yards. However, Van Jefferson is going to be a sit. Not a whole lot. He had 4 targets, 1 catches, 9 yards. It's not a great day for Van Jefferson. He's kind of been pushed to the side now that Nacua and Atwell have come out of the shadows. How about the Bengals side? Jamar Chase and T. Higgins will be a start for me. Burrow is questionable, so keep that in mind heading into this matchup. He does have an extra day of rest, which is definitely beneficial for Burrow. But Chase and Higgins seems to be the guy that is going to take majority of the offensive roles from Burrow. Higgins had himself a day last week with 8 catches, 12 targets, 89 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So welcome back to Higgins. So that's going to do it for the wide receiver portion. How about the quarterbacks? Why don't we jump right back in over to Thursday Night Football? We got the Giants and 49ers, like I stated on that one. We have Daniel Jones as a sit and Brock Purdy as a start in this matchup. Brock Purdy, like I said, the Giants have 2 rookie corners going up against Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. So Brock Purdy should have a very good day. He has not been super fantasy relevant, but he's been a decent quarterback if you drafted him. If you don't, like for instance, if you have Aaron Rodgers, that's somebody he has a backup. He's not a bad backup to stream for now. Hopefully he starts picking it up though, and I think this is a matchup he can do that. Falcons and Lions now, and I'm going to go ahead and sit Desmond Ridder and start Jared Goff. Jared Goff had a really good week last week with 325 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. He's been able to keep those turnovers to a minimum, it seems like, which is definitely a plus in Jared Goff's game. Chargers and Vikings, and both these guys are going to be starts for me here. We have Justin Herbert, who just came off a good performance as well against the Titans, 305 yards and 2 TDs, no turnovers. Kirk Cousins balled out on Thursday night last week with 364 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 fumble. His fumbles and his turnovers are just killing him overall. He's got to step it up there. But for him to put up the points that he did, even with those turnovers the last 2 weeks, yeah, Kirk Cousins is on pace to have a career year. Might even have an MVP year at this rate, the way he's been playing, just minus the turnovers. Saints and Packers, Derek Carr, like I said, the Saints barely squeaked out past the Panthers. So Derek Carr is going to be a sit, and Jordan Love is going to be a start. Now, Jordan Love's numbers last week were not great. He had 151 yards throwing, 3 touchdowns, though, so they capitalized on that. But he did have 2 attempts to run for 23 yards as well. So he did have a couple rushing attempts, which helped his fantasy value a little bit. But being at home against the Saints now, who, like I said, just barely passed the Panthers, that's a matchup I really like Jordan Love in this week. Texans and Jaguars, and CJ Stroud finally threw for over 300 yards to start for any rookie so far. He is the first one over 300 yards, it feels like. 384 yards to be exact for CJ Stroud, 2 touchdowns. He did have a fumble, and one of those touchdowns being to Tank Dell and Nico Collins. Now, Trevor Lawrence did not have a great game against the Chiefs here. 216 yards, 0 touchdowns, and a fumble. Not the best day for Trevor Lawrence, but again, matchup against the Texans, this is something where the Texans don't have a really good run defense. This is going to be run defense right out the gate. They're going to be running it down their throat, it seems like. But you're not just going to be able to run it all the time. You're going to throw in some passes. And with the way that they're going to stock those boxes against the running back and ETN, I think this is a great matchup for Trevor Lawrence to be able to sling it a little bit and get some fluff points from his wide receivers. Broncos and Dolphins now, and we got Russell Wilson as a start here. Wilson, 308 yards, 3 touchdowns, an interception, and a fumble in week 2. Not the best game for him when it comes to turnovers. However, he did finally show some upside, which is definitely a plus. On the other side of the ball, Tua will be a start for me as well. 249 yards and a touchdown for him. Jalen Waddle did go out with a concussion. We'll see what happens in that situation. But Tua has been doing really well as well this year. Titans and the Browns now, and we're just going to, at this point, might as well just move on to the next game. These guys are not performing. Ryan Tannehill is not performing. 246 yards is not terrible for him. He did have a touchdown and a rushing touchdown. But week 1 was not his best performance at all. This is a good bounce back from week 2. But now you got to go up against the Browns defense, who has been absolutely stingy. The Browns did lose in Monday Night Football against the Steelers, but that was not on their defense. That was on their offense. So that being said, that defense has been performing, and I don't know if Tannehill is going to be able to perform as well as he did in week 2 like he did against the Chargers. Chargers have just been terrible on defense in week 1 and week 2 against the Dolphins and Titans. So Titans had a good matchup last week. This matchup this week, I'm not a big fan of. On the other side of the ball, Deshaun Watson, like I said, he's got to perform better. 235 yards, a touchdown, interception, 2 fumbles. You can't have that from a quarterback, especially one that's highly paid as he is. Now we got the Bills and the Commanders, and I'm going to go ahead and start both of these guys, Josh Allen and Sam Howell. Sam Howell had 299 yards throwing and 2 touchdowns. Meanwhile, Allen, 274 on throwing and 3 touchdowns. Definitely good matchups. Raiders defense is not the best. They're more middle of the pack. However, the Broncos have a very good secondary, and for Sam Howell to do that against the Broncos in Mile High Stadium is definitely a plus for me, especially now that they are at home against Buffalo instead of in Buffalo. How about the Colts and Ravens? Gardner Minshew looks like he's going to take over center here. Looks like Anthony Richardson will be out more than likely. That being said, though, Gardner Minshew, I got to see what he does with the Colts organization. For right now, he's going to be a sit, especially in a matchup in Baltimore. Definitely another tough stadium to play in. Lamar Jackson, on the other hand, will be a start for me. He balled out against the Bengals, 237 yards and 2 touchdowns. And he also had 54 yards rushing, which is definitely a plus side to Lamar's game. And we love dual threat quarterbacks in fantasy football. Patriots and Jets now, and this is another matchup where I had a little back and forth here. Mac Jones, I was tossing back and forth between a start and a sit, and I'm going to go ahead and start him. 231 yards and a touchdown on Sunday Night Football against the Dolphins is not terrible. You'd like to see a little bit more for that. Now, the Jets defense has been gassed after that opponent of Dallas. They just ran right over them. It felt like, again, that offense can't stay on the field long enough to get that defense a break, and that's going to eventually hurt the Jets here, especially on defense. So Patriots, I'm going to hope is going to take an advantage here. I'm going to go ahead and start Mac Jones. Not a very confident start, but enough to where I'm willing to throw that start on there. Zach Wilson, on the other hand, is going to be a sit. Zach Wilson's back to doing Zach Wilson things after that Monday night game, which just seemed like an all-out fluke. Panthers and Seahawks, and this is where it's a little interesting. Bryce Young is questionable with an ankle injury, and Andy Dalton might be under center this week. Andy Dalton being a veteran going to Seattle is definitely a plus when you have a veteran quarterback. However, the way the Seattle Seahawks just played and the way Geno Smith just played, I'm not going to start either one of those guys against Seattle, especially in Seattle. Geno Smith, on the other hand, after his performance and a comeback, I'm going to go ahead and start him. 328 yards, 2 touchdowns, and he ran for 20 yards. That's definitely a plus for Geno Smith there. Now we got the Bears and the Chiefs, and Justin Fields has not been performing to what people have expected so far this year. It's honestly been a really big disappointment if you do have him at quarterback. I have him in one of my leagues, and he's just killing me left and right. I had to go to waivers to pick somebody else up just to be able to stream until he can show me anything different. So Justin Fields is a sit for me this week, especially in Arrowhead, and then Patrick Mahomes will be a start. It looks like he's finally back. 305 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Obviously, the Jaguars did hold them to 17 points, but it's good to see Mahomes finally put up good quarterback numbers again. Cowboys and the Cardinals, and Dak Prescott will be a start for me in this one, and I'm going to go ahead and give Joshua Dobbs a start. Not super confident in that start, but here's where I am confident enough to put a start label on Joshua Dobbs. He had 228 yards in week 2, a touchdown, and ran a touchdown in while also running for 41 yards. Again, dual threat quarterbacks, when you're down in games, and especially when you expect this type of matchup, I expect Dallas to be up early. The Cardinals are going to have to run with their quarterback to escape getting sacked, which is a plus of Dobbs' game, and you're going to have to be able to throw it. And Dobbs was doing pretty well against the Giants up until the point where the whole entire team imploded and the Giants made a comeback. So those two will both be starts for me in week 3. Moving on to the Steelers and the Raiders, Kenny Pickett is going to be a sit for me in this one. If it wasn't for that big play and busted coverage of George Pickens, he'd not be in any type of start consideration for any of these podcasts or any of these YouTube channels saying start sits as well as us. 222 yards on a touchdown and interception. Like I said, that 68 yarder or 71 yarder, whatever it was, that Pickens caught from Pickett, definitely fluffs his number up a little bit. Definitely kind of helps skew it. So for this week, I'm going to go ahead and sit him, especially on the road against the Raiders. Jimmy Garoppolo, same thing for me. Yes, he had that touchdown early against Buffalo with Devontae Adams. However, the rest of the day, not so good. 185 yards, 1 touchdown to Devontae Adams in the first quarter, and then 2 interceptions following. Finishing up with 2 Monday night games here, we got the Eagles and the Buccaneers, and I'm going to go ahead and start Jalen Hurts here. Not the best week for him on the throwing side, but again, that rushing upside is definitely a plus for Jalen Hurts. 193 yards passing and a touchdown. He did throw a touchdown pass. Rushing, though, 35 yards and 2 touchdowns on the rushing side. 3 touchdowns all day for Jalen Hurts is definitely a must-start in the following week, especially against the Buccaneers. Baker Mayfield has been doing Baker Mayfield stuff of old. Not the Baker Mayfield at the end of his career in Cleveland, and more at the beginning of their career in Cleveland. Kind of what we seen when he first came in on a 4-day, getting signed 4 days, 2 days before a Thursday night game with the Rams last year. He threw for 317 yards and 1 touchdown going to Mike Evans. That's enough right there for me to go ahead and start him. Then you're not looking for 20, 25 points from him. You're looking more 17 to 20 in that range. So for me, that's a big thing for Baker Mayfield. You're not getting a whole lot of volume out of it, but enough to where you could plug him in this week and be, okay, I'm good. Especially the way that the Patriots and the Vikings just scored, and their quarterbacks did pretty well in the last 2 weeks. Rams and Bengals, we got Matthew Stafford versus Joe Burrow. I am going to go ahead and start Matthew Stafford. When it comes to fantasy football, he has been doing really, really well. 307 yards, a touchdown. Now, 2 interceptions against the 49ers. You kind of expected that against the 49ers defense. Maybe not 2 interceptions, at least one of those. Their defense is just good. And that was in LA. But 307 yards and a touchdown is definitely A-okay with me for Matt Stafford. And going up against the Bengals defense, who has been struggling against the last 2 opponents. Burrow, on the other hand, 222 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Like I said, he re-aggravated that calf. He's questionable going into this matchup. For me, that's going to be a sit. And that's going to do it here for Play Action Fantasy Football. This is the wide receiver quarterback start sit. Look out later today for the running back and tight end video. And make sure you give us a like and subscribe. We definitely are going to be doing this every single week. We want to make sure that we're helping you guys out. And if you have any doubts about these start sits, go ahead and let us know. Let us know. We want to see, if you have a question or anything, drop it in the comments. We'll answer it as soon as we can. We want to be able to give you why we think he shouldn't be a starter, why we think you might be able to. You're debating between 2 guys. Go ahead and let us know in the comments. We'll help you figure it out. We're just here to try to help you guys win championships, and we'll do that weekly. Other than that, you guys have a good one. Enjoy the week of football.